The fog rolled in thick that morning, swallowing the cul-de-sac in a dense gray that clung to windows and car mirrors. It was the kind of morning where sound felt muffled, where you had to squint to see the end of your driveway, where everything looked a little softer and more sinister. Lily March zipped up her red parka and adjusted the strap of her navy blue backpack. She hated the way the cold bit at her ears, but the school bus didn't wait for slow walkers. She turned at the edge of the porch and waved. "Love you, sweetheart." Her mother, Teresa, called out, still in her bathrobe, one hand wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, the other holding back the screen door. "Go straight to the stop, okay?" Lily nodded. "Always do." She smiled. That was the last time Teresa saw her daughter alive. At 7:53 a.m., the school bus stopped at the end of Hillmore Lane. The driver, Mrs. Alden, waited the usual 2 minutes, checking her watch and peering through the windshield. Lily never arrived. She assumed the girl was sick. By 8:24 a.m., Teresa was calling the school to excuse her daughter's absence, only to be told Lily never showed. The mug shattered on the kitchen tile as Teresa dropped the phone. Panic doesn't arrive all at once. It begins with a cold spot in the chest, an ache in the throat, a racing mind convincing you it's a misunderstanding. But by 9:15 a.m., Teresa was sprinting down the block in slippers, screaming her daughter's name into the fog. Neighbors stepped out of their homes. Doors opened. Whispers turned into shouts. One woman ran to get her husband, who joined Teresa in his truck to circle the neighborhood. Others called 911. The first responding officer knocked gently before entering the March home, his notepad already half full. "You're sure she left the house, Mum? I watched her walk down the steps." Teresa gasped, tears streaking her cheeks. She waved to me. I told her to go straight to the stop." The officer pressed. "Anyone else live here with you?" "No, just us." The officer's eyes scanned the kitchen. A plate of uneaten toast, an open carton of orange juice, a drawing of a unicorn on the fridge, titled Lily's Dream Horse. By noon, search teams had been dispatched across Hillmore Lane and the nearby Forest Trail. K-9 units swept the area. A chopper hovered low over the leafless woods. Volunteers lined up in makeshift grids, calling her name through the gray. No backpack, no shoes, no footprints, no sign of a struggle. Nothing. Teresa sat on the porch swing, rocking slowly, arms wrapped around herself like a straitjacket. Her face had hollowed in just hours. She wouldn't run off. She kept telling the reporters, "She's afraid of the dark. She still sleeps with a nightlight." Her voice cracked. She was coming right back. By the following day, Lily's photo was on the evening news. A smiling, dimpled girl in a school uniform, staring at the camera like she knew secrets she'd never tell. A week later, the posters began to peel in the cold. Rumors started in coffee shops and classrooms. She was kidnapped. She ran away. The mother knows more than she says, but none of them could explain how a child could vanish into fog just feet from her home. And no one saw the gray van, somewhere, parked just out of view. Its engine had idled for exactly 3 minutes. Detective Megan Holloway had seen her share of missing persons reports. Teenagers running away from bad homes, custody disputes, even false alarms. But something about Lily March's file made her pause. The details were too clean, too empty. No prints, no backpack, no phone, no dropped lunchbox, just a vanishing point. One child-sized gap in the snow-covered sidewalk, and a mother whose panic rang too sharp to be grief alone. She arrived on Hillmore Lane by late afternoon, when the fog had cleared but the tension hadn't. The neighborhood looked as though it had collectively held its breath. Cars sat idle in driveways. Curtains twitched. Volunteers moved with slow purpose. Teresa March was wrapped in a quilt on the porch, her hands shaking, eyes vacant. "Teresa," Holloway knelt beside her. "I'm Detective Holloway. I want to help find your daughter. May I ask you a few questions?" Teresa's voice was soft, cracked like dry glass. She went down the sidewalk. She waved, then she was gone. Did she say anything unusual that morning? She was quiet. She had a math test. I told her not to stress. I should have walked with her. Have there been any unfamiliar vehicles in the area? Anyone watching the house lately? Teresa blinked. No, just the same quiet street as always. But it hadn't been quiet. An hour later, Holloway interviewed the boy who lived to. Doors down, Ethan Miller, age 9, small for his age but sharp-eyed, sat nervously at his kitchen table as his father looked on. She was talking to someone. Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. To who? Holloway asked gently. I don't know. I was inside, but I saw her from my window. She was talking through the window of a gray van. Holloway's pen paused mid-sentence. A van? Yeah, like, old-looking. Kinda dented in the back. Did you see who was inside? He shook his head. Just saw her head turn. Then the van drove off. Real slow. His father leaned in. Why didn't you tell us this before? I thought maybe it was a friend or something, Ethan whispered. But she didn't look happy. Outside, Holloway stared down the street, where shadows from the bare trees clawed across the pavement. She jotted notes. A gray van, possibly. PRE 2000s, unidentified driver. Last seen within a 4-minute window. She put out a bolo. 3 separate vans were pulled over that night. None matched. None had been near Hillmore Lane. One belonged to a retired mailman. Another dead end. The next morning, Holloway returned to the March house. She found Teresa at the kitchen sink, washing dishes she hadn't used. The counters were spotless. To spotless, have you remembered anything else? Holloway asked, eyes scanning the spotless tile and fresh lemon scent. No, Teresa said, without looking up. I can't think straight. But Holloway noticed it, the compulsive scrubbing. The silent moments held too long. A mother of a missing child doesn't usually clean. They unravel. Where's Lily's backpack? Holloway asked. Teresa turned slowly. What? She would have taken it with her, right? Has it been found? Teresa looked dazed. No. I never thought about it. That bothered Holloway. A missing child. An erased morning. A too-clean kitchen. A mother who cried when people were watching but seemed cold when they weren't. Still, there wasn't enough. Not yet. Back in her squad car, Holloway jotted down a new list of follow-ups. House-to-house inquiries, recheck traffic cams, return to Ethan's street view. She looked in the rearview mirror, her eyes catching a reflection of the March house. You're hiding something, she muttered. And across the street, someone was watching from a second-floor window, the curtains barely opened. By the 6th week, the urgency of Lily's disappearance had faded into something colder, procedural. Flyers browned around the edges, search parties thinned, and even news anchors said her name with less urgency, more fatigue. But Detective Megan Holloway hadn't stopped watching. She sat in her unmarked car across from the March residence, sipping bitter coffee and reviewing the log of interviews. And there, buried in page 6, was a name she hadn't yet seen in person. David March, Teresa's estranged husband, legally still stepfather to Lily, had moved out 3 months before the disappearance. No active restraining order, no alibi. On file, that morning, Holloway knocked on a blue-shuttered house 3 towns over. The door opened just enough to reveal David March, mid-40s, handsome in a tout-perfect, plastic way, his hair slicked back, his jaw shaved smooth, his smile immediate and wide. Detective, he said, voice warm like butter left too long in the sun. What took you so long? I'm following up on the Lily March investigation. May I come in? David leaned on the doorframe. I figured this would happen eventually. The media needs someone to blame, right? Holloway didn't flinch. It's not the media asking. It's me, inside. The house was spotless, modern, furnished with pieces too expensive for a mid-level sales rep, especially one recently separated. I still care about Teresa, he said, pouring himself a glass of wine. Lily too, but I haven't lived there in months. She'll tell you. Where were you the morning Lily went missing? He sipped. Home. Anyone who can confirm that. A long pause. I don't keep a guest list, detective. And would you be willing to provide a DNA sample for exclusion? David's smile thinned. Is that really necessary? It's routine. I'd prefer to talk to a lawyer first. Holloway's eyes locked onto him. There was no fear in his face, no sadness. Just that irritating calm, like he was auditioning for innocence. As she rose to leave, she caught sight of a family photo still hanging in the hallway. Lily's young face smiled from beneath David's arm, but someone had scribbled something in pen on the glass. She leaned in. Liar. The next day, Holloway paid Teresa a visit. He refused to give DNA. Teresa's hands trembled around her tea mug. He wouldn't hurt her, detective. Why do you think that? Because he's not that man. We had problems, but he loved Lily. He raised her since she was 5. He never even raised his voice at her. Did they ever argue? Teresa hesitated. He thought I was too soft with her. Thought she needed structure. But he never laid a hand on her. You said he moved out. Why? I asked him to. Things got tense. He'd drink, disappear for days. Sometimes he'd come home smelling like perfume. And you never reported any of that? Teresa's eyes brimmed. I didn't want to make trouble. Holloway stood. I'll need your permission to search any communication between you two from the past year. Texts, emails, voicemails. Teresa nodded slowly. Whatever you need. That night, Holloway reviewed Teresa's phone records. One voicemail from David stood out, timestamped 3 days before Lily vanished. You think I'm just gonna walk away? She's mine, too. I don't care what your therapist says. I won't let you turn her against me. She played it twice. The next morning, Holloway obtained a court order for a full background search. David had no criminal record, but something else flagged. A sealed juvenile file from Ohio, age 17. Assault charge, suppressed due to age. Holloway pressed harder. She re-interviewed neighbors near David's current residence. One mentioned seeing an older gray van parked in his driveway just days after the girl went missing. License plates had since been removed. When confronted with this, David laughed softly. I've owned 3 vans, detective. I resell junkers. You think I buried a kid in one? No. Holloway said coldly, I think you used it to move her. David's smile didn't fade, but his hands tightened around the armrests. Then, prove it. And that's when she noticed it. A faint red mark below his shirt collar. Scratch? Rope burn, hard to tell. But it was new. I'll be in touch, Holloway said. Already heading for the door. Outside. The air bit colder then. It should have for March. The gray van. The voicemail. The altered photo. The scratch. She needed something physical. Something buried. And someone was about to give it to her. It began with a note. Folded neatly and slipped beneath Teresa March's apartment door. It was written in thick black marker on a scrap of printer paper. She's not dead. Ask the Woods. No signature. No envelope. Just that. Teresa stared at it for a full minute before moving. Then she tore open her closet, threw on a coat over her nightgown, and drove straight to the old trail behind Hillmore Lane, the path kids weren't supposed to take to the bus stop. She wandered for hours, shouting Lily's name through brittle trees and frozen brush, her voice cracking against the silence. She fell twice. Her knees bled, but she didn't stop until her phone battery died in the dark. The next morning, she showed the note to Detective Holloway. Someone knows something, Teresa whispered. I need you to get dogs back out there. Holloway examined the paper. Under latex gloves, there's no traceable print, no envelope. Anyone could have written this. You don't believe me. I believe you got a note. But Teresa, this could be a sick joke. A joke. Teresa's voice rose. You think someone faking my daughter's survival is funny? I didn't say that. I said we need more than one line of marker on a torn sheet of paper, but then came another, for days later. It arrived by mail, no return address. A crumpled photo of Lily, or what looked like her, standing outside a rundown motel. Her face was blurred. The note read, Exit 17, Room 6, 3 a.m. Teresa didn't wait for police approval. She drove out there alone. The motel was empty. Room 6 had been abandoned for years, boarded up and stripped bare. But on the ground just outside the door, half buried in wet leaves, she found something that nearly stopped her heart. A charm from Lily's old friendship bracelet. She collapsed to her knees, weeping. You're still here, she whispered. I knew it when she handed the charm to Holloway. The detective stared at her grimly. We don't even know if it's hers. I do, Teresa snapped. That's our charm. I gave it to her when she turned 9. She wore it every day. Then how did it end up outside a condemned motel? In a place no child's been for years? I don't know, Teresa choked. But someone is trying to lead me. That's exactly what concerns me. Holloway's doubts had begun to calcify. Teresa's emotional swings were too sharp, her obsession too conveniently timed. She lashed out at reporters, accused neighbors of withholding the truth, called the precinct 3 times a night demanding action, and each time a new lead surfaced, Holloway found herself asking the same question. Was someone toying with Teresa, or was Teresa toying with them all? One afternoon, Holloway visited the mail center used to process the motel letter. The clerk remembered nothing unusual, no fingerprints, no footage of the drop-off. That night, Holloway drove by Teresa's apartment and saw the lights still. On at 2 a.m. through the window, Teresa was scribbling furiously in a spiral-bound notebook. Papers scattered around her like a nest. Holloway knocked. No answer. She returned the next day. Can we talk? Teresa answered in sweats. Hair unwashed, eyes red. I'm close, she murmured. I know I am. I can feel her. You need sleep. I need my daughter. No. But Holloway had started to notice something colder beneath the grief of performance. A script. Every story Teresa told was clean. Every outburst, timed. She glanced around the room. On the fridge were newspaper clippings, photographs, pins and red string like something from a conspiracy thriller. But one photo caught her eye. A snapshot of the motel from the outside. Grainy, as if taken before the letter arrived. Where'd you get this? She asked. Teresa blinked. It was mailed to me. No, the photo. This angle, it's from the side lot, not visible from the road. Teresa hesitated. I guess I went back there, took some shots for the police, but she hadn't submitted them. Holloway left shortly after, her gut twisted. Back at the precinct, she opened a private report, psychological profiling for families of missing children. Underlined were terms she'd started circling in her head. Projection, fabrication, obsession, dissociation. Was Teresa slipping into delusion or manipulating the system? One more letter arrived a week later. Check the furnace, she screamed. Teresa didn't call the police this time. She drove straight to her old house. The new homeowners were gone for the weekend. She broke in with a hammer. She clawed at the furnace door with bare hands. By the time the police arrived, she was sobbing on the basement floor, fingernails bloody, shrieking that Lily was beneath the ash. There was nothing there. But Holloway knew what the letter meant. And the next place to look was the garage. The March house didn't sell easily. By the time it went on the market, 9 months after Lily's disappearance, buyers flinched at the address. The walls had absorbed too much grief. Realtors whispered about bad energy, strange smells, lingering sorrow. Still, a young couple with a newborn finally bought it, drawn in by the low price and the quiet street. 3 weeks after they moved in, the wife called the local utilities office. There's a smell, she said. It's burning, but only when we run the heat. A city inspector came and went, shrugging. The ducts were clean, the system old but functional, but the smell persisted, sharp, metallic, faintly sweet, a scent that clung to the nostrils like regret. So they called the police, not out of panic, out of unease. Detective Holloway arrived reluctantly. She had visited this house too many times already. Still, something tugged at her as she stepped into the garage. The air hotter than it should be, a low humming from the corner. The furnace stood alone like a silent witness, old, dented, paint chipped around the handle. Has this been replaced since the March family lived here? She asked. No, the husband replied. Still original. We just had it serviced last winter. She crouched, opening the service panel with gloved fingers. Heat exhaled against her face. Jesus. She whispered. Inside, amid ash and soot, was a tiny object wedged between two blackened coils. A partially melted red button, small, round, thread still attached. She fished it out with tweezers, dropped it into an evidence bag. Later, at the lab, a forensic tech tilted his head as he examined it under magnification. It's not much, he said. Could be from any coat. Holloway tapped the edge of the table. Could it match a girl's parka? Age 12, he nodded. Possible, but it's damaged. Can't confirm origin. No blood, no tissue. So we have a maybe, not even. That, we have a melted button and a smell, Back at the house, Teresa stood in the garage, clutching a framed photo of Lily. Her face was slack, her eyes gone gray. She stood right here, she whispered, the morning she left. She used to tie her shoes by this furnace. I told her it was dangerous. She traced her fingers along the dented edge. Where did you go? She murmured. To the air. Holloway watched from the doorway. Teresa, I know she was here. I believe you think that. She was here. The detective hesitated. We found a button. It may have come from her coat. Teresa's face lit up. A flicker of fire in the ashes. I knew it. But that's all. No other evidence. We can't confirm anything. Teresa's expression collapsed just as quickly. She was burned, she whispered, wasn't she? We don't know that. She screamed. Teresa said, eyes wide. The note said it. I heard it in my sleep, over and over. You didn't hear anything, Teresa. Your mind is doing what it has to do. That's grief. That's trauma. Teresa didn't move. The furnace let out a low mechanical sigh, almost like it was breathing. Holloway turned toward the wall and noticed something new, a faint square on the sheetrock. Behind the furnace, a patch that had been sealed, painted over clumsily. She stepped closer. Tap. Hollow. Double quotes. I want this section opened, she said, to the forensics officer beside her. Now, within minutes, drywall was crumbling to the floor. Inside, however, was no body, no bones, just a bundle of fabric, black trash bags wrapped tightly around something soft. They peeled it open with careful hands, a child's pair of pink gloves, slightly singed, still bearing the initials LM in stitched thread. Teresa collapsed to her knees, sobbing into her hands. This is enough for a search warrant, Holloway muttered. We missed something here. We stopped too soon. She turned back toward the garage doorway, toward the empty hallway that led deeper into the house. Something had been hidden here, not just evidence, but time, and someone wanted it buried. The cold never left Pennsylvania, even in spring. A chill lingered in the bones of its towns, clinging to the walls like grief. Teresa March now lived in a cramped third-floor apartment above a shuttered bookstore. Her curtains always drawn, her phone unplugged most days. Time had blurred the lines of her life before Lily vanished, and after. She no longer visited the old neighborhood. The March home, long sold and repainted a cheerful blue, stood like a betrayal. Kids played there now, in the yard where Lily's swing once hung. Teresa rarely looked out the window anymore, but she still talked to her daughter every night before bed. Are you safe? She'd whisper. Are you angry with me? 9 years had passed since the morning Lily didn't come home. Detective Megan Holloway had retired 5 years earlier, quietly, without a press conference. After Lily's case turned cold, she stayed on out of guilt, but eventually, like most officers with unresolved files, she folded the folder shut. A photograph of Lily remained on her bookshelf, propped beside her badge and a fading flyer that read missing, Lily March, age 12, but in the shadows of online forums and backroom video edits. Interest in the March case simmered. Jackson Lane, a 31-year-old former journalism major with a raspy podcast voice and a taste for lost causes, launched a limited series called Buried Voices. His intro was moody, the music subtle. This isn't just another unsolved case. It's a web of silence, fear, and something far more unsettling. Listeners hooked on episode 1. He didn't chase clickbait. He had a method access public, records, contact family members if they'd talk, and interview officers tied to cold cases. And when he mentioned Lily March in episode 3, traffic doubled overnight. What caught Jackson's attention wasn't the absence of leads. It was a small note buried in the original police logs. Ethan Miller, the young boy who had claimed he saw Lily near the van, had changed his story. But that change was never followed up. Redacted interview. Why? Jackson asked his listeners. The kid's statement changed, and nobody asked why. The clip of Teresa crying on the local news was spliced between podcast breaks. She's gone. Please, please. Whoever has her. Her voice cracked into a scream. The silence afterward was unbearable. Jackson reached out to Holloway. She didn't answer for a week. Detective Holloway? Jackson asked when she finally picked up. Not anymore, she said flatly. And I don't talk to the media. I'm not the media. I'm just trying to understand what everyone missed. There was a pause. Then everyone misses something. That's why cases go cold. He pushed gently. What happened to the boy's second interview? The one that's redacted. Her voice changed, just slightly. I wanted to protect him. He was scared. His parents didn't want him dragged through it again. But did he say something that changed the course of the case? Holloway exhaled. He said the man in the van waved at him, smiled, then told Lily something that made her laugh, and she got in. Silence. You thought it was someone she knew, Jackson said. I knew it was someone she knew. Jackson's voice lowered. But you never followed up. Why, I did, she replied. But not everything leads somewhere. Sometimes it just dies. But that night Holloway didn't sleep. She dug out the old box from her attic, brushing off years of dust. The notes were there, her handwriting still sharp, Ethan's name, the van, the furnace incident, and the one thing she had buried in Gil Teresa's first phone call. She had reported Lily missing at 7:38 a.m., but school buses didn't run until 8:15 that day, delayed for fog. Why would Teresa panic 40 minutes before Lily was even late? Holloway stared at the timestamp again. How had she missed it? Down the hallway. Jackson opened his email inbox and saw something new. Subject, the furnace. You missed something. It was from an unlisted sender. Attached was a grainy image, a close-up of a metal button, partially charred. Below it, for words, you're getting closer now. The rain had been relentless that week, steady, cold, and unforgiving. The kind that seeped through old brick and gathered where it didn't belong. Inside 118 Myrtle Avenue, once the March family home, water dripped steadily into a metal bowl placed beneath the basement ceiling. Claire and Jonah Whitmore had bought the house 2 years earlier, unaware of its grim legacy. To them, it was simply a fixer-upper, tucked into a quiet street near good schools. They had painted over the walls, installed floating shelves in the dining room, and converted the basement into a laundry space. But now water stains bloomed across the basement ceiling like bruises. We've got a leak. Claire had told the plumber on the phone. It's behind the drywall. You might need to cut into the old furnace line. By 3:14 p.m., Carl Henley, 57, stooped from 3 decades of crawling beneath homes, was crouched in the basement with a flashlight clamped between his teeth. The drywall was already damp. He ran a hand across the bulge beneath. The pipe joint, not from the water line. He mumbled, "This is coming from the duct shaft." He marked the drywall, sliced it open with his utility knife, and pried off a square panel. Behind it was the old ventilation pipe, long rusted, sealed decades ago, now blackened and brittle from time. Something was wedged inside. He reached in, tugged. Plastic, thick, torn. Then he saw it. A shape, too small to still. The wrench clattered to the floor as the plumber staggered back, bile rising in his throat. Police tape wrapped around the house. Before sundown, Claire sat trembling in the back of an ambulance, hands stained from where she'd tried to help the plumber, not realizing what they'd found. Jonah stood motionless on the curb, eyes fixed on the basement steps as crime scene technicians moved in. Detectives arrived in silence, exchanging glances as body bags, smaller than usual, were carried up the steps and placed gently into the coroner's van. Inside the wall, ductwork had been dismantled section by section. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. 3 trash bags, a faded school cardigan, a pink sneaker, stuffed into the child's ribcage to save space. The bones had been crushed, not violently, but deliberately compressed to fit into the vertical shaft. Experts later said it would have taken both time and precision. When news broke, the internet exploded. The name Lily March trended by nightfall. Teresa didn't hear about it from the police. She heard it from Jackson Lane. She didn't answer his first 3 calls. But when she finally picked up, her voice was hoarse. "They found her," he said, barely above a whisper. "In the walls, your old house." Teresa's breath caught. She didn't scream. She didn't cry, just silence. Then, she was there. All this time, yes. "I lived in that house for 6 months after she disappeared." Her voice was numb. She was right there. Jackson didn't know how to respond. Later, Holloway stood on the edge of the crime scene, rain soaking into her coat. eyes fixed on the house she'd driven past 100 times. She hadn't seen this coming. She had knocked on that basement door. She had leaned against that very wall once, taking notes, and Lily had been there behind it. A forensic tech approached her. "Ma'am, there's something else you'll want to see." From the last section of pipe, they had pulled a narrow Ziploc bag containing a folded scrap of paper. Despite the decay, one corner remained legible. Written in faded red marker. In a child's hand were 3 words: "He tricked me." The March house stood still in the early morning fog. Yellow tape fluttering like ghosts on its porch railings. Searchlights cast long shadows across the lawn. As officers hauled in ground-penetrating radar equipment and thermal scanners, the excavation had begun, not with bulldozers, but with scalpels, carefully, methodically. They peeled back layers of history. It started in the garage. A hairline crack had been noted in the concrete 2 years earlier by an inspector, dismissed as settling. Now, when the forensic team drilled into the floor near the corner shelving unit, the first scent that hit them wasn't mold or dust. It was iron, old blood. They removed the concrete in small squares, dusting each with luminol. Within the hour, the chemical glow revealed it, faint but unmistakable. Blood, saturated deep into the subfloor, almost like the house had drunk it in. Samples were rushed to the lab. When the results came back, there was no doubt. It was Lily's, and someone had tried to scrub it. Sanded, bleached, sealed over, not once, but multiple times. The attempt to erase it had been obsessive. It hadn't worked. Detective Holloway watched from the curb, jaw clenched. She had returned to this house more times than she could count. Each time, it had withheld something. But now it was speaking. Inside the kitchen, a team lifted sections of tile, uncovering what looked like paint flecks embedded in the grout. But closer inspection revealed tiny fragments of fingernail polish, pale pink, chipped. Lily had worn that color the week before she vanished. Holloway remembered. Teresa had shown her a school photo. Lily smiling with her missing front tooth, pink nails raised in a peace sign. Teresa was brought into the station that evening. Not under arrest, not officially, but the air felt charged, the same way it does before a storm. She sat across from Holloway, a disposable cup of water trembling in her grip. "You lived in the house for 6 months after Lily disappeared," Holloway said gently. Teresa nodded, eyes dark-ringed. "Did you ever go into the garage?" "All the time," she whispered. "The washer and dryer were out there." "Did you notice anything strange? Smells? Stains?" Teresa's lip quivered. "I thought I smelled paint thinner once, but I was barely functional. Detective, I was taking pills to sleep, to wake up. I don't remember entire weeks." Holloway placed the Ziploc bag on the table, the one containing Lily's note. "He tricked me." Teresa stared at it, face crumpling. She was writing again. I didn't know she was scared." Her hands trembled as she reached for the note, fingers hovering above the plastic, never touching. "I should have known," she whispered. "I was her mother." Holloway sat silently, letting the weight settle in the room. "I was so angry. Back then, at everyone, at myself, at Lily sometimes, for running off. I thought she hated me." "She didn't," Holloway said softly. "We don't think she ran." Teresa flinched. "Then someone took her. Someone right under my nose." The room felt like it had shrunk, like the walls were breathing. Teresa bent forward suddenly, face in her hands, a raw, guttural sob escaped her throat, the kind that only comes after years of holding it all in. "I failed her." "No," Holloway replied firmly, "but someone else didn't. Someone succeeded in hiding her and making sure you questioned your own mind. We think whoever did this wanted you to believe it was your fault." Teresa looked up, tears streaking down her face. I need to remember everything." Outside, the moon had risen over the March house. In the basement, a technician swept the flashlight across a sidewall near the breaker panel, then paused. Carved faintly into the wooden beam, just below eye level, was a name, Lily, and beneath it, in childlike scrawl, "Still here, detective." Holloway returned to the interrogation room with a folder tucked under her arm. The air still held the weight of Teresa's earlier breakdown, but the woman sitting at the table now looked different, hollowed out, defeated, like something had cracked inside her and couldn't be put back. Holloway slid into her seat across from her. "There's more, isn't there?" Teresa didn't answer at first. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "He came back that night." Holloway's pulse quickened. She kept her face calm. "David." Teresa nodded slowly. "The night before Lily disappeared. You never mentioned that in any of your statements." "I couldn't. I was afraid." Holloway leaned forward. "Afraid of what?" Teresa's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "Of not being believed. Of losing everything. Tell me what happened." Teresa stared at the wall behind Holloway, as if watching something replay that only she could see. It was late, around midnight. I was folding laundry when I heard a knock at the back door. It was David. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Sweaty, wild-eyed, like he hadn't slept in days. "What did he want?" "He said he missed her," said. "He'd been thinking about Lily non-stop, and that he needed to see her. Just for a while. Just to talk. And you let him in." Teresa nodded, shame flickering across her face. "I know how it sounds, but he wasn't always bad. He could be charming, gentle, and I was tired, Holloway. I was exhausted. He said he brought her a small gift, a necklace, the one we found in the garden." A slow nod. "He gave it to her that night." Holloway's voice dropped. "Then, what?" Teresa's throat tightened. "We argued, loud. I told him he couldn't just show up after everything. I told him I didn't trust him, but he kept begging. He said he just wanted to take Lily for a drive. Said it would be a short one, that she needed to get out of the house, breathe, calm down. She'd been having these nightmares and wasn't sleeping, and you agreed." Teresa's voice broke. "I didn't want to. I swear to God, I didn't want to. But he kept saying, 'You're her mother, don't you want her to feel safe? She loves me. Just let me take her for an hour.' And I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought maybe if I gave him that, he'd finally leave us alone. So you let her go." Tears spilled freely now. I stood at the door and watched them drive off. She waved at me from the passenger seat. She looked tired, but she smiled, and I never saw her again. The silence that followed was thick and painful. Holloway's voice was steady but laced with urgency. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" "Because I knew how it looked." Teresa whispered. "That I just handed her over. And then when she didn't come back, I panicked. I lied. I said I put her to bed. I said I found her gone the next morning. I thought maybe he'd bring her back and I could pretend it never happened. But he didn't." Teresa shook her head violently, and every day that passed, it got harder to admit the truth. I started to believe my own story. But at night, she touched her chest. It was always there. The guilt, like acid, like I gave her away. Holloway pushed the folder across the table. "We found your daughter's name carved in the basement. Still here." Teresa's breath caught. She was trying to tell us something, or someone was. Maybe David brought her back. Maybe he didn't kill her that night. Maybe he hit her first. Teresa's mouth opened, then closed again. "He used to mention the old shed near Coldwater Creek. Said it was where he'd go when he needed space." Holloway's eyes sharpened. "That's not on any of the previous search grids. I didn't remember it until now." Teresa whispered. "But he said it was his quiet place, a cabin or a tool shed near a dry well. Do you think he could have taken her there?" "I don't know," she said, shaking her head slowly. "But he told me once, years ago, right after we split, no matter what happens, I'll keep her safe." Holloway stood, heart pounding. "We'll find it. We'll go tonight." As she stepped out into the hall to alert her team, Teresa called after her. "Detective." Holloway turned. "She loved fireflies," Teresa said faintly. "If there's any part of her still out there, she'll be looking for the light." The arrest warrant came faster than anyone expected. After Teresa's tearful confession, detectives obtained a fresh warrant and reopened every thread involving David March. One thread led to a P.O. box in rural Ohio, another to a water bill in the name of a fake business. Detective Holloway, brought back as a consultant, pushed for an immediate stakeout. David was living in a rusted trailer off a dirt road 20 miles from any major town. No neighbors, no utilities, just a bitter wind through the trees and a trail of cigarette butts leading to a battered lawn chair. The trailer, surrounded by overgrowth, had become part of the land, forgotten, quiet, and heavy with unease. But it was the van they were after. Hidden beneath a tattered blue tarp beside the trailer sat a gray 1990s Dodge Caravan, its sides caked with mud and moss. The license plates were missing. One headlight had caved in. Grass had grown up through the tires, a forgotten ghost of motion. The forensic team approached with care. Holloway stood by, arms folded, her expression unreadable. When they peeled the tarp back, the van exhaled rot and decay. The back door creaked open like a coffin's lid. Inside was a time capsule. Under the passenger seat, a small, pink hairbrush tangled with long, light brown hairs. On the dashboard, a faded school photo of Lily, age 6, taped to the sun visor. A red circle had been drawn around her head, not once but several times, the ink angry and uneven, as if the hand that held the pen shook with emotion. In the glove compartment, a spiral notebook, filled with drawings, childlike at first glance, but the longer you stared, the more the horror seeped in. A stick figure girl behind bars, another in a furnace. One page simply read, "She screamed too much. David returned from town on foot." A bag of canned goods in one hand, a gas can in the other. When he saw the flashing lights and the officers gathered around the van, he froze, then he ran, but he wasn't fast anymore. His limp betrayed him after 20 feet. He dropped the gas can and disappeared into the woods, but was tackled moments later by the state troopers. As they cuffed him, he spat toward Holloway and hissed, "You are always too late." Inside the station, he refused to speak without a lawyer, but he didn't need to say much. The evidence spoke volumes. Back at the precinct, Teresa was told about the van. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing, not the kind of sob that erupts suddenly, but the slow, breaking sob of someone whose bones had been rotting under the weight of guilt for years. She asked one thing, to see the notebook. Holloway debated, but relented. Teresa studied the pages with trembling hands. She stopped on a sketch of a small girl curled inside a circle, like a womb, or a cage. The caption read, "She sleeps when I tell her to." Her eyes glazed over. "I never knew he was that sick," she whispered. Holloway sat across from her. "But you suspected." Teresa nodded faintly and said nothing more. The next morning, media trucks parked along the road near David's trailer. Word had spread fast. "Suspect arrested in 10-year missing girl case" blared across headlines. Reporters buzzed about the items found in the van. Internet sleuths dissected every page of the notebook, now part of the official investigation files. One blogger noted the presence of strange numerical codes in the margins. Another highlighted recurring references to a cold room. But Holloway was focused on one page, a crude map hand-drawn, with a big red X marked behind the trailer. A cadaver dog was brought in. At 7:13 a.m., the dog barked once, sharp and high, and began to dig beneath an old fire pit behind the trailer. A shovel struck something hard. Metal. They found a sealed drum, rusted but intact. Inside, more child belongings, tiny shoes, a polka-dotted lunchbox, a bundle of letters addressed to Daddy. Most were drawings, but one had writing, blocky, childish. "Are you mad at Mommy? Please let me go home." Holloway stood over the drum, face pale. Everything had led here. 10 years of silence, of grief, of doubt. And now, finally, answers buried beneath soot and dirt. But not closure. Not yet. Because as the officers carried the drum away, Holloway caught sight of a final page in the notebook. The one glued to the back cover. It read, "One more secret, one more place." The courtroom sat frozen, suffocating under fluorescent lights and years of silence finally breaking open. David March sat hunched at the defendant's table, hands trembling beneath cuffed wrists. His lawyer leaned close, whispering frantically, but David didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the photo across the room, Lily's school portrait, printed large and framed in white. Her eyes, forever 7 years old, seemed to stare through him. Teresa sat behind the prosecution, her hands clasped in her lap so tightly they turned white. Holloway, no longer a detective, but still wearing the badge and spirit, sat beside her. Time had turned his hair gray and his face sunken, but the fire in his eyes remained. When David finally rose to speak, the room grew still. The judge looked over his glasses, weary and braced. The silence stretched until David cleared his throat. Voice low and cracked. "I didn't mean for her to die," he said. "I swear to God, it was an accident." A rustle moved through the gallery like wind through dead leaves. Teresa closed her eyes. Holloway didn't blink. David continued, eyes trained on the defense table, unable to meet anyone else's gaze. "She cried a lot that night," he muttered. "Said she missed her mom. I didn't want her to hate me." His voice broke, and for a second he almost looked like a grieving man. But then came the words that twisted the knife. "I just wanted her to listen." The prosecutor stood. "Mr. March, did you wrap her in trash bags and conceal her in the ductwork of your garage?" David looked down. "I panicked. You panicked," the prosecutor repeated coldly. "And yet you had the presence of mind to melt her button in the furnace, to wipe the subfloor clean, to silence every trace of her existence." David had no answer. The silence in the courtroom was heavier than any scream. Sentencing was swift. The judge's voice rang with restrained fury. "You robbed a child of her life, a mother of her daughter, and a community of peace. There's no accident in what you did. There's only choice, and your choices were monstrous." David March was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The day Lily was laid to rest, the sky was soft with gray clouds. The town gathered near the memorial garden, a quiet patch behind the old elementary school. Someone had placed her photo at the base of the new plaque. Fresh lilies lined the path. Teresa stood alone near the front. She held the small urn containing what remained of her daughter bones, fragmented from years in hiding, finally identified, finally free. Her face was pale but composed. Tears long since dried into something harder. The town pastor read a short prayer. Then he stepped aside. Teresa moved to the podium. "I used to dream about her," she said. Her voice was low, calm. Sometimes she'd be in a field, sometimes in the back seat of a car, but always calling for me. She looked at the faces gathered, neighbors, old friends, strangers who had followed the case online. For years, I didn't know what was real anymore. Grief changes you. It poisons everything. It made me lie. Made me convince myself that if I just stayed silent, somehow, it would undo what happened." A sob came from somewhere in the crowd. Teresa's hands gripped the edges of the podium. "I failed her, but she never stopped trying to be found. She never stopped speaking." She paused, looked toward the trees swaying behind the crowd. "I hear her now," she said. "Every night." Her voice never stopped. "We just weren't listening." As the ceremony ended, church bells tolled 12 slow, echoing chimes each. One seemed to stretch into the sky, calling back time, summoning peace. Teresa stepped away from the podium and knelt beside the memorial stone. She placed a folded letter beneath a small bouquet of daisies. It read simply, "I remember everything. Now, I'm sorry. I love you." That night, the streets were quiet. Teresa sat by her apartment window, the urn on a shelf nearby. The room cast in soft amber glow. Jackson Lane's podcast episode played low in the background. While the nation focuses on the horror of what David March did, the deeper tragedy lies in how many warning signs were missed, how many people chose silence over suspicion, and how, for almost a decade, Lily's voice was louder than anyone dared admit. Teresa muted it. She reached for the framed photo on her windowsill, Lily in her red coat, eyes bright, mid-laugh. "I hear you," she whispered. "I always will." As wind brushed through the open window, something about it felt like breath, like a whisper returned. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but recognition. A chapter closing. Another beginning. The truth had come, finally. And with it, the ache of justice. But justice always costs something. And for Teresa, it had cost everything. It was a small box, tucked away in the back of the town library's archives, faded photos, copies of flyers, yellowing newspaper clippings. On the front, in bold black ink, someone had written, "Lily B. Watson never forgotten." Inside were fragments of a decade-long nightmare, a child's missing poster, a candlelight vigil program from 1998, a crayon drawing of a house with a swing, Set signed, Lily, age 7. Each item was a reminder not just of loss, but of how long the truth had waited in the shadows. After the trial, Holloway retired quietly. He moved to the edge of town where no reporters came, but he kept a small envelope on his desk, the first tip he'd received, now water-stained and worn. It had come from an anonymous caller who only said, "Listen to the attic." No name, no number, just that dot. To this day, no one knows who made that call. Teresa moved once the trial ended. Her home, the one where Lily's room had stayed untouched for years, was sold to a couple with no children. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't leave a forwarding address, but at every anniversary, flowers still appear at the school memorial. White lilies, always 5 stems. Some believe it's her, others aren't so sure. David March was transferred to a maximum security prison in upstate New York. According to prison officials, he rarely speaks. He refused interviews, letters, even the chance to appeal. He spends most days pacing alone. Head down, inmates call him the ghost. For the town of Elmridge, the case became legend, part warning, part folklore. Parents still tell their children to come home before dark, to never keep secrets from mom, to trust their voice if something feels wrong. But beneath the headlines and court documents, one truth endures. Lily was never truly gone. Her voice lived in floorboards and hollow spaces, in sleepless dreams and whispered guilt. She had been silenced, yes, but only by those too afraid to listen. Now, when the bells ring on cold spring mornings, some say they still hear her. A laugh, faint as wind. A name, called out like a song. And if you're quiet, very quiet, you might hear what Teresa heard. A child's voice, soft and steady, no longer afraid. "I'm still here.